In this video I'm going to be showing you how I complete a watercolour seal. I didn't take the first part of it because I forgot to press record, so apologies for that. What I've done is I've painted the whole inside of the body with a wash of burnt sienna and then burnt sienna with a tiny bit of ultramarine blue in places, just to get that darker brown colour under his belly, under his chest, under his flippers. Okay, and then what I've done is I've wiped out then with a thirsty brush. And what I mean by a thirsty brush is a brush like a flat brush like this. That's been moistened very well and then wiped with a flannel. So you've got an absorbent brush. And then while this was wet, I then just pressed in and took out some colour, and there you can see the result. It's a paler area, but it's got a soft edge like on the top of the head. I took out some chinks there. I kept around the mouth and then left the other areas with a mid-tone finish. Okay, I'm painting this seal on a 9mm plywood board. I bought them off eBay. You can type in on eBay A3 9mm plywood boards or custom cut 9mm birch wood boards. It's made from birch and they'll cut them to size for you. It's not very expensive, probably about well, £8 for this, but you can stretch a piece of paper on this side, and then when that's dry you can stretch a piece of paper on the back. And to protect your boards, protect the paper on the boards when it's dry, you can put a bit of, just plain paper and stick it on here and there, so that when you're working on it, you don't damage the painting underneath. So this is how I do my preparation work. I find painting on stretched paper is nicer because when I start to apply the paint, the watercolour paper doesn't buckle and cockle and cause all those peaks and troughs in the paper where the water congregates, There's a video on my YouTube channel called How to Stretch Watercolour Paper. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video so you can watch that. It's worth doing. And what I tend to do is I tend to stretch about 4 pieces of paper in one go. So I spend about 40 minutes, probably about 30 minutes, 40 minutes stretching 4 pieces of paper, so that I've got them ready for when the urge to paint strikes. So this painting is bone dry now. I've let it dry overnight. I'm going to re-wet it now, because I fancy adding some more colour to it and to strengthen the overall colour vibrancy, because it's a little bit pale in areas. So I'm going to wet down the front of his chest, his head, back of his shoulders. Now the previous wash shouldn't start to float off too much. It'll reactivate, but it shouldn't. You can see the shine there now. See the shine come in? Bit more water. Try and re-wet it in light, brief strokes using the side of your brush, not the tip of your brush. Then you can reactivate the painting in order to take another wash without disturbing all the work you've done the day before or in the session before. You will get some dislodging of watercolour unless you've used a staining paint. Right, so I've done that. Now I just fancy a little bit of quinacridone coral. Don't ask me why, I don't know. I just fancy this lovely colour. Daniel Smith colour. So that's about the strength of the mixture I'm going to put in. And I'm just going to drop it under the chest, mostly near the base, because the warm light bounce from the surface where the seal is will reflect some warm light up, bouncing up under his chin as well, and the inside of his mouth there. Let's put some. Guess I've warmed him up now. I won't put any on this fin here because this plane of the fin is going to be catching light from above. And what I do with planes that catch light from above is I tend to put cooler glazes on those. This isn't officially a glaze because I'm not painting it onto dry paper. I'm just charging a wash of this pink into re-moistened paper. So that's how it's looking now. He's nice and warm. Okay, I like him a bit more now. Okay, I just wanted to add a bit of colour contrast as well as tonal contrast. So while he's still moist, if you can just see, I'm trying to show you the light here. Yeah. You still see there's still some sheen in the paper, so the paper is still workable. Let's drop a little bit of maybe this cobalt teal blue. Again, beautiful colour by Daniel Smith. And I'm going to drop that on, all on his back. And top of his head and top of this fin. It will start to bleed and merge and won't look so scary. I'm taking it right to the tips of his toes there. I'm going to rinse my brush very well and flick it to get the excess moisture off, and now just blend that down a little bit more. Rinse, flick again. Take some of that down into the shoulder, where the shoulder will be catching some blue light from the sky, and just blend it down. Then I need to soften that edge of it in this big flipper because it was forming a bit of a hard edge. Okay, so now I've got a bit of cool blue. Oh, I've got a blur there. A cool blue from the sky and warm light bounce from the ground. Now what's happened is I've got a bit of a blur here. So what I'm going to do with this brush, I'm going to moisten it totally. So I'm going to press the brush on the bottom of my jug. See all the bubbles coming out? Get rid of all those bubbles, it's moistened. Bring the brush out, dry the shaft, and then dry the brush head. It's very absorbent now. So I'm going to suck up that blur, rinse my brush, dry it again, always pull away from the ferrule, pull away towards the end of the brush so that you keep the brush shape in good condition, and keep wiping it away until you've got rid of the worst of it. Okay, so at this point now, let's zoom out. That's how he's looking, and I'm going to let him dry naturally. Hi there. So now we're going to focus on getting some foam on the actual face, the head of the seal. And if you have trouble looking at, shadows and degrees of light and dark on anything, if you're a beginner painter or if you've just sort of got out of the habit of doing it, you can kickstart this process by posterizing an image that you have, or if you can't posterize it in a software package, you can just exaggerate the lights and darks on your mobile phone if you take a picture of it. So all I've done in this image, for example, is I've just get a bit closer. I won't do it like that. Right, okay. So what I've got is I've made the photograph black and white, and then I've posterized it, which means it groups all similar tones into smaller groups. Okay, so it groups all these darks together. You can see the dark sort of shapes. Then there's a greyish tone, a darker grey coming away from that. Then a sort of mid-grey coming away from that, and then heading into lights. Okay, and another thing to help you see the lights and darks on a form is to turn it upside down, turn the image upside down. And you might find that by looking at it in this unusual position, that the darks and lights may become more evident to you. Okay, for example, you can really see now that dark under the chin and that high white in the forefront of his jaw. So do whatever it takes to help you see the real strong darks, the really high lights, and then the mid-tones are easy to manage. It's the very dark, strong darks and the very high lights that you need to position well, and then you get a good, shape for whatever you're painting, whether it's fruit, flowers, houses, people, animals, or still life, anything. Okay, so this is what we're going to do now, is get some dark tones into the head. So to do that, I'm going to wet the entire head area very carefully so that it's moist, and then when I drop in some tone, it will be a soft edged effect that I get. So to soften the head, I've got about a little size, what is this, a size 2 brush. So I'm going to moisten that, and just using the side of my brush, using light strokes, I'm going to re-moisten the entire head and a little sort of margin past it. So I've got a bit of a buffer zone into which paint can bleed and not form a hard edge. So go around the whole outside of the head, inside the head, using the side of your brush. Don't use the tip of your brush, use the side to stroke on those veils of water. And what I'm looking for is a consistent moisture sheen all over. If I can just see that now, see there's the sheen, you can see the light hitting it. It's not a wash with water, it's just got enough moisture on for us to be able to drop some colour in. So what I'm going to do now is dry this brush on a flannel. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up some burnt sienna, and I'm going to dip into the sort of goopy bit of it and then bring it onto the palette. Now that's a bit too much obviously, so I'm turning my brush and tailing it off. Now that's about the strength of it and the size of the brush. So look, I'm looking at my grayscale image and I'm going to drop in those darker areas. They may bleed a little bit, but if they bleed, it'll be a soft edged bleed, and I don't mind that. So I'm just following that dark that I can see in that posterized image I just showed you. It's quite a dark piece there on the side of his head. That's the core shadow, you see, on the side of his head. So it goes up a bit more under his nose, sorry. There's a little bit of dark coming forward there. A bit of dark on the side. I'm using a very small size 2 brush, so I've got control. My paint isn't very wet at all, it's quite viscous. And I'm going to put a little bit of darkness in the eye. As you can see, it's not bleeding much, but it's there. And a little bit of a dark sort of shape under the ear. Right, so if I zoom out now, got a bit more of the head shape. Just going to pop the two little shapes in for the nostrils. And again, they'll bleed a little bit, that's okay. Right, I'm going to rinse my brush and flick it back and forth on the side of my jug. So now I've got a very, very slightly moist brush. And I'm going to blend this dark paint down a bit now. And I can do this because the paint is still moist, because we painted it into moist paper. And so it's easy for me to blend this dark paint around. Again, I'm just following the grayscale of the image in front of me. And of course this shade that I'm bringing out is a mid-tone. I'm bringing some of that darker paint out onto moist paper, which then dilutes it and makes it paler. And you've got to work quite quickly because we want to work while the paper is still moist enough to allow these soft blends. And I'm even flicking some of that up and under, up and over his lips, you know, of his mouth, so we get a soft blend there. I'm doing a little bit of shading as well around his eye, because his eye is embedded into his skin, so I want that to have a slightly softer blend. And the nostrils as well, just blend in a little bit more over there. Right, so if we zoom out now, we've got a little bit more of a face going on, okay? So now, while it's still quite moist, I've got a tiny Matthew Palmer flat brush, a lift out brush, but any small flat brush will do. The finer the better. I can just show you that. There it is, very small and fine. And I'm going to lift out again. Each time you lift out some paint, rinse it and dry it on your cloth again, and then go back in for a very fine highlight. Very pale highlight on the top of the nose there. There's a bit of a highlight where the ear comes away from the head, and there's a little bit of light catching it there. It's very small. You might have to do this a few times because the brush is so small it takes out minuscule amounts of paint. But the cumulative effect will be, you'll have a little highlight there which tells us that's the seal's ear. And I'm going to make a line in the middle of the mouth where I can see that shape, that form in the seal's mouth. And then a little highlight here on the left side of his nose to separate his nose from the rest of the back of his head. Right, I'm going to let that dry now, and then the last thing I'll do is I'm going to pop a little bit more detail in the eye. So, for the rest of the seal now, let's start work on the chest. And again, in my grayscale image, you can see the darkest part of the chest is right under there. Then we've got a darker grey, and then the greys get paler and paler. And the palest areas of the body are on the back, between the back and the neck there. Okay, so I want to get some of those shadows in again. So to do this, I'm going to work upside down because I'm going to be dragging the darkest area away. So I put a dark area there and then drag it away to sort of have a gradual effect. So to do that, I'm going to moisten a size 8 brush. And just moisten all under the chest and part of that flipper. Again, some of the paint from the previous wash may start to reactivate with this wetting, but it shouldn't disturb it much if you're using a gentle brush strokes and not too many of them. If some paint does start to come away and form hard lines, just soften them with a moist brush. Right, I'm going to pick up now some burnt quinacridone rust, sorry, but quinacridone rust is very similar to burnt sienna. Then I'm going to pop into that some quinacridone coral and a tiny bit of French ultramarine blue. So this is going to be quite dark now compared to what we've already got on the seal. And this dark goes all under this flipper here. And that's the extent of that really strong dark. A bit more there. Now I'm going to rinse my brush very well and give it a good flick on the floor of my studio, and then use that moist brush to blend out those edges. Rinse again, flick again, rinse again, flick again. Make sure that everything's got a chance, got a wet area out into which to bleed. Now for the actual fin, the flipper here, the dark part starts about here and then that fades out going down towards the end of the flipper. So again, I put a dark piece on. Now you'll notice that I put that on to dry paper. I didn't wet the paper first. I did that because this is just a small area and I can handle the blending quite easily by using this moist brush to help me have some gradual fading away of that dark passage into the end of the flipper. And then blend it away, blend that dark piece away into the main part of his body with a moist brush. Now as we come on to the body, this is a larger area, so I am going to re-wet this area again with my size 8 or 10 round watercolour brush and moisten all the body right up to his back. And if you are using 100% cotton paper, you'll notice that this absorbs a lot, and you'll need to maybe put another brush load of water on in order for that moisture to stay slightly shining on the surface. Don't let it disappear and become damp, otherwise your paint won't flow so well. So again, I'm going to flick my brush to get off the excess moisture, pick up some quinacridone rust or burnt sienna, some more quinacridone coral, and a touch of French ultramarine blue. And again, I'm going to drop that dark in on the body, the underside of the seal. And this time I'm going to let gravity help me, and I'm going to tip it. And the paint should gradually start to creep forward. I've got it at about 45 degrees, and the paint should creep forward, and I won't need to use any brush strokes for that to happen, and we might get some nice granulation effects as well. So if I can just show you see the sheen there? The body of the seal has dried a little bit in this area here, so I'm going to risk it and touch in with a moist brush very tentatively. It wasn't a very moist brush, it had a tiny bit of moisture in there to help that bleed happen. Now what we've got now is a gathering of a bead of water all across his back, so I'm going to tip it back the other way. See the sheen there? And just let that bleed back down in. I'm going to pick up some more cobalt teal blue. And drop another stroke or two of that in his back to strengthen that bluey green on his back for a bit of colour contrast, and on the side of his neck there as well, because that'll be catching some light cast down from the sky. See, and I was painting that into slightly moist paper. So I'm going to lay that flat now. And I'm going to let everything dry, and then we're going to come in and put some final details into the face. Right, everything's dry now, so we're going to go back into the face and do some final details to bring him to life. So I've got a size 2 round brush here. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay, so once again I'm looking at my grayscale, and I'm going to go for that burnt quinacridone rust colour and a little touch of French ultramarine blue. So I've got strong dark. There you can see the paint is quite viscous. I'm painting on dry paper with a size 2 brush. And this is where we are doing very strong calligraphic marks. forming the outside of the mouth. And I will be putting the whiskers on, probably with a little bit of white gouache or white body colour. So we need some whiskers in there. And for the eye now, I'm going to make the ear extend out and past his head so that it shows up a bit more strongly. There's another rim around the eye. I'm just putting another sort of layer to the eye there. Okay, rinsing my size 2 brush, flicking it really hard, and then because it's now slightly moist, I'm going to just blend up those darks up and over the lips again, the mouth, taper them away just to soften them a bit, and soften that bit of dark I did on the ear as well. Rinsing, flicking. You can flick your brush on the side of your jug or flick it down towards the floor. My floor is covered in water and drops by the end of a session. And just softening this edge as well, and the edge there on the bottom of the mouth. Taking a little bit of that colour that's now deposited on my brush around to give a sort of second tone. I've got paler in the middle, then a mid-tone in a sort of U shape, and then the darkest tone is the one I put on dry paper. I feel I need as well to take a little bit of this dark from the side of the face and drop it under the eye to give the eye a second tone, a second sort of line there, and then the darkest part of the eye is above that. And a little bit of the second tone around the eye. Just brushing a little bit of what's left on my brush over the nostrils. And I'm going to zoom out now. See how he's looking. And that's how he's looking right now. I'm going to go in finally now with a tiny bit of white. You can use opaque white, white gouache, or anything opaque like white acrylic, because I'm going to need that to just put a tiny speck of white, so the life light in his eye. Very small brush is my white here. This is Designer's gouache, titanium white. I'm going to mix a tiny bit of the quinacridone rust with it, so it's not pure white, but it'll be a highlight nonetheless in the eye. That's as close in as I can go without getting it blur. So a little tiny light there. And then maybe a little water line. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to leave it there now. And so with this we can do some whiskers now. And this opaque white does dry paler actually, so it might look a bit thick there, but it does dry a bit paler. And there is our seal. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this tutorial. If you have, please could you give me a like, and if you want to follow me and be around when my next video comes out, which won't be long, please click the notification bell and make sure you click the dark grey bell, which means you'll get all my notifications, because if you just click subscribe, that doesn't mean you'll get a notification when my next video is live to watch. So if you click the grey bell as well, that would be awesome. And any comments you'd like to make, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this tutorial, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.